Hello, and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week, we continue our retrospective focused on movies based on Stephen King's Carrie. This week, we discussed the 2013 film Carrie, starring Chloe Grace Moretz. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So, warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of the upcoming book California Tiki from the History Press. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, tech director at Rooster Teeth Studios, lead singer of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hi.
Howdy.
Also in Austin is Mr. Drew Edwards, editor-in-chief of HorrorMovies.net, writer for Rockabilly Online, and creator and writer of the long-running comic Halloween Man. Say hello, Drew.
Hello.
Also in Denver, as always, color commentary from attorney Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. She's also a member of the improv a cappella vocal group In Harmony's Way. Say hello, Julia.
I'm just going to say hello because Drew didn't say hello, Drew. So I was like, all right, fine. I guess we're not doing that today.
In my heart, who was that? That was Burns and Allen. It was Gracie Allen made that
Yes.
joke originally. In my heart, you did the Gracie Allen joke. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Carrie is a 2013. I feel like I have deja vu. This is the strangest experience. Carrie is a 2013 American supernatural horror film directed by Kimberly Pierce. It is the third film adaptation of Stephen King's 1974 novel of the same name. The fourth in our retrospective, because we also included Carrie 2, which was, in a sense, another remake of Carrie. It had a screenplay by Lawrence Cohen, who wrote the 1976 movie, and Roberto Aguirre Sacasa, who is the gentleman who brought us Riverdale. It stars Chloe Grace Moretz as Carrie White, Julianne Moore as Carrie's crazy mom, Margaret, and Judy Greer as Miss Desjardins. So, this is a reimagining of the horror novel Carrie. If you don't know what Carrie is, I encourage you to go back and listen to our 2 or 3 previous episodes. We've been diving deep. It's been an extraordinarily strange experience to keep looking at this story. And let's get our opening thoughts. Also, this is the end of the retrospective, so you can kind of make your opening thoughts about this movie or about the whole thing or whatever. Let's go Julia, Drew, Tony, and then I'll go. So Julia, what are your thoughts on Carrie 2013, and if you like Carrie, the entire phenomenon?
I really liked this one. I felt like it was much more realistic for me that Chloe, the whole thing, because I was so troubled with the 26-year-old and the 28-year-old playing a character who's just now getting her period, but this is an actual 15-year-old, and so it's not common, but it makes more sense. So that's not disconcerting. And the whole idea of just her being in high school and experiencing these things is more realistic because it's an actual teenager. I like a lot that this character is so much more of a, in my opinion, horror character because she's a witch. I mean, she literally flies around. She actually is conscious for all of her things that she does. She controls, she's choreographing the whole thing at the prom and all that. I really enjoyed how deliberate her actions were. I felt like it was a much more interesting character in some ways. And in other ways, the other characters are more interesting because of the fact that they kind of check out. So we had that conversation last time about whether, the fact that Carrie checks out when she does the prom horror and then kind of zones back in and goes, wait, what just happened? This time, no, she's fully there. So I'm excited to talk about it. I'm excited to talk more about the relationship with her mom, with Julianne Moore playing her, and I think it's a really interesting film.
Excellent. Who do we say? Drew, what are your thoughts?
I didn't actually. I was expecting to hate this because I know Tony was very adamantly not a fan. I didn't think it was an amazing movie by any means, but I didn't mind it. I thought it was just campy enough to where it was funny to me a little bit. It had kind of a little bit more of a cheese factor, but at the same time, it's a much nicer looking movie than the previous one. Like, it was definitely a bigger budget movie, and it also had, again, writers involved with it that I admire their work for, and other things. And in particular, you previously noted that he's the guy that is the head writer on Riverdale. but he also did the Marvel Knights Fantastic Four comic book series, and I really enjoyed that. So I thought this one was pretty good. Carrie is a lot less sympathetic in this version, and I guess on some level that does make her scarier. I do kind of find myself struggling with that choice a little bit, because to me, I think the fact that she is a pitiable figure is one of the things that makes her interesting. But I thought all the actors did a good job, and I think the bullying in this seemed a lot more. I would be in agreement with Julia. I feel like the bullying in here seemed a lot more like stuff that would go on in high school when I was in high school, outside of the cyberbullying, which is of course a new thing.
Yeah.
But like the way the kids behaved, it did more or less ring true to the way kids pick on each other. So I liked this. I didn't love it. It had some cheesy stuff that didn't go over, but for the most part, I liked this one.
Excellent. Tony, where are you landing with this?
I guess I liked it better than I remembered, but to me it feels, I was surprised at how much that it tracks with the miniseries. So it's kind of, in a lot of ways, more of a remake of the TV version than it is the original, which I found to be interesting. I didn't remember that, but it just kind of breezes. It's kind of a Cliff Notes of all of it. It's shorter than that, so it doesn't have as much depth. I guess it's gorier. Everybody does a pretty good job with what they're given. Like Julianne Moore is super Julianne Moore, and everybody's okay at it. To me, it just feels like a slightly gorier version. I didn't like that she doesn't check out, that she's just a homicidal maniac, and it kind of doesn't. Also, it doesn't work for me really as well. Like in the book, with this one, and we can talk about it later. But the whole it's very similar to the I take off my glasses and tousle my hair, and now I'm magically beautiful. Carrie White's never beautiful, even if she wears a better dress, etc. And all that kind of stuff. I don't know. It's okay, but to me, it's kind of pointless as a remake. I mean, I guess, 30-something plus years later or more, I guess it's good to remake a film again, but it doesn't do anything, as we've covered all of these, it doesn't do anything we haven't seen before, other than have, really good actors and actresses in it, I guess.
Yeah. I actually want to, when we get towards the end, because the last topic we'll cover is the prom. So I want to hold my thoughts on the prom sequence, because I think, as with all of it, you kind of need to compare each piece. But I found myself this time, as I was thinking back on this movie, I was thinking specifically back on the 1976 original and trying to reckon with that one. I do think it's really interesting that in the 1976 one and in the 2002 remake that we saw, both of those, Carrie really seems to check out, go into a fugue state, be taken over, and her body is just doing a whole bunch of crazy shit that she then sort of snaps out on after she floats out and goes on a rampage. In this one, they've made a very sort of clear. Instead, Carrie is just enraged and in a berserker rage, but it's not like a berserker rage like Wolverine, where he barely knows what he's doing. She is enraged, but this is the first time we've seen Carrie be basically like the bride with white hair. If you know that film where she's had enough, and now and she's now going to lift her arms and just start doing crazy things. And that's you do see her being bullied, but by the time you get to the end of this movie, this one says, no, Carrie's become a supervillain. We can feel sorry for that all these bad things happen to her, but she's a supervillain now.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
Let me finish your thoughts, but then I want to address.
That's it. I got nothing else. I want to go into the topic, so go ahead.
Okay, because I want to say that I think the reason I like this choice so much is because I don't see her as a supervillain, because I see her as a revenge demon, like a vengeance demon. You know what I mean? Like basically she's it's kind of like any of these movies where somebody, whatever, I don't know, Jackie Chan or or Liam Neeson or whoever, somebody hurts their family, somebody hurts them, somebody does whatever, and suddenly they're like, you know what? Screw the law, screw everything.
That's a really good point.
I'm going to kill the crap out of every quote-unquote bad guy, and they might not be bad guys. They might be just some guy that was security guard that was hired by these people. He doesn't know. He's killing the crap out of everybody, this person. So in this case,
even
she's
like in
that
Man
way
on Fire,
too. She's
or
decided, you know what?
Yeah.
Like you said, I'm sick and tired of this, and I'm not going to take it anymore. I'm going to kill the crap out of everybody. But she's decided it. And I'm not saying it's a legitimate choice and that she should have done that and that I forgive the character for that. But I think it's really interesting, given that it's a female and a young female at that she has been freed to just decide to kill the crap out of everybody who's even slightly harmed her or it was in the vicinity of people who harmed her.
She does save.
Uh-huh.
She saves Miss Desjardins. She saves the coach.
She saves.
And
She saves the teacher, and Sue's not in danger. Because remember the one guy who was nice to her prom date, has now been killed by this bucket. So she not only has been humiliated in herself, but her one of like two friends that she had, or three, is dead because of this. And so she's just really pissed off, and she's powerful. I mean, so it's kind of like. It's kind of like the dark side, like the Jedi is going over to the dark side and be like Anakin. It's like Anakin just going like, no, you know what? I'm not going to be this goody two shoes. I'm powerful and I'm going to show it off and I'm going to kill the crap out of a bunch of people. I loved that. I think it was a very interesting choice for the character, and I'm glad she wasn't pitiable in this particular. I mean, I'm glad that I'm not saying that story shouldn't have existed. I'm just saying I think it's
I don't disagree with you, but let's come back to the prom and the rampage when we get to the last part, because we have basically 4 topics. The topics are the mom. And by the way, I owe this outline of topics to online commentator Dice Rollin, who did this wonderful comparison of Carrie versus Carrie 2 and said, you got to look at the mom, the teacher, the girls, and the boyfriend. And I would throw in the prom after that, but it makes it really easy to organize. In each one of these, of course, the mom is an important character. So let's start with the mom. In this one, mom is played by Julianne Moore, and I just want to point out right now that the most Stephen King-y thing about Julianne Moore's performance is that she listens to Tennessee Ernie Ford. I think that is wonderful. And that as she's hanging out, she's like listening to these cheesy mid-century gospel records by country and western delight, Tennessee Ernie Ford. What did you guys think about this? Not Tennessee Ernie Ford. I'm sure you have no opinion about that at all, but go ahead.
Well, I also like that choice, but I think Julianne Moore is really a hoot, and that's the only way I would describe her. Like she's probably the most entertaining version of this character that we've seen throughout all these movies, and she's also simultaneously the most over the top. She cuts herself. She's got this really weird voice that she's put on. I just got such a kick out of, like, she was basically one dial down from being a character in a John Waters movie. I really, really, really just laughed my ass off at Julianne Moore. And I think Julianne Moore, and I really just think that she kind of knew what sort of movie she was in, and, knew that this had the potential to be kind of forgettable. So she just really chewed up all the scenery she could. And I thank her for it, because, like, otherwise, this is our 3rd version of Carrie in a row. It's the 4th one we've watched. This could have been really dismal to watch in a lot of ways, and she kind of saved it from being that in every scene she was in.
Here's a question for you. Apparently, Sissy Spacek was considered for the role of the mom for this movie. How would that have been different from Julianne Moore?
That would have been great. I would have loved to see Sissy Spacek in this role. Honestly,
I don't know why she didn't do it, but yeah.
Yeah.
I liked her. I like Julianne Moore. I think she's good for this. I like the fact that, again, I mean, I'm saying that, kind of hitting this point too many times already, but I like that Carrie is standing up to her in a real way. I mean, she's that like I said, this is more to me. This is more horror than any of the other ones have been, because when she decides to lock her mom in the prayer closet so she can go to prom, she seals her mouth and like sends her flying through the air into the closet, and then melts the lock. So all these things she does, it's not just, oh, whoops, I lost my temper and I'm sorry I hurt you, but this is the thing. These are all very deliberate points, and I think it's a really interesting response to having been, abused and tormented her whole life, and now, like I said, she's going on this tear and she's gonna get back at people, but she feels bad about her mom. Like, she doesn't want to hurt her mom. She does love her. It's very, very battered woman, battered child kind of response, because she's like, I want to stand up for myself and I don't want to hurt you, but I'm not going to take it anymore. I'm not putting up with it. So it's a very cool relationship.
I enjoyed, Tony made a point last week about how one of the big weird things about Carrie's mom is that she makes up stuff. I mean, she's completely invented her own brand of Christianity, including a lot of like biblical lessons that she's sort of just gleaned, as any religious expert, leader of a flock might do, except for that she's a flock of two, and she's, and so she's made up this whole thing about the curse of Eve, and she has a whole doctrine about that, and in theory she seems to think that Carrie maybe wouldn't even have gotten a period if somehow she had remained sinful, if she had remained pure. It is, and the thing is, I agree with you, Drew, that she's really chewing up the scenery, and at the same time, Julianne Moore is so good that you believe that this person exists. That like this is the first movie where we see her at her job as a unless we saw Piper Laurie at her job, and I don't remember that. You see her at her job as a seamstress, and you see her try to interact with other people in the community, and she's so incapable of it. It just drives her insane. So she's like poking herself with a seam ripper.
Don't misunderstand me by saying that she chews the scenery and saying that I think this is shoddy work, because I mean, Anthony Hopkins in Silence of the Lambs is a very big performance. That doesn't mean it's not believable in its universe that it's taking place in. And I would put that in this kind of category. It's very big.
That makes sense.
It's very broad in its way, but it's not by any means not believable.
I'm with you.
And crazy.
Tony, Tony, what were your thoughts here about Julianne Moore and her nut job religiousness?
Oh, I mean, she's great in the film. I mean, regardless of how, I think overall there's not much use in the film. I hate to say that, because not everybody does a good job. I still think, like, having watched it, it's just yet another Carrie film.
Yeah.
It doesn't do anything new, but everybody who's in it is doing a good job. And I think some of the updates are great. Yeah, Julianne Moore is great. Like, as is her weirdo, terrible psycho mom. In fact, like, the way that she plays it, I mean, it's also off-putting in that, King kind of dials us in the book too. Like, I've known people, luckily not as crazy town as this, but you meet people and they say like different things, or even seeing pastors where you're like, that's not how that really goes.
Yeah.
That's really not how that passage is, or what version did you read, or how has that been rewritten? How is that being rewritten for you? I don't, but the way that she plays it makes it totally believable. And really, I mean, it really does hit home.
Yeah.
As far as how that works out, and her punishing herself, that happens a lot of times in, extremely fundamentalist people. There's this, this kind of fetish for, especially if you believe in this original sin, that everything is sinful, and you're just constantly trying to claw your way back out of that.
Yeah.
She plays that really well, and that's also, again, the trick that lures, in reality as well, lures her daughter back. Well, I don't want to watch my mom hurt herself.
Yeah.
But it becomes this reaction of, if I do this, in the way that your child will throw down in the middle of a grocery store when they can't get what they want. This banging your head against the wall and doing all these things is also a way to get attention and to bring it back to themselves, so that the other person feels either guilty or has to pay attention or whatever. It's a common, really bad psychological thing that is effective in many ways for those people.
Boy,
And,
you brought up something really important there. That whole thing about how she doesn't just chastise herself because she thinks that she's sinful and bad, Julianne Moore, but she also chastises herself as a means of punishing and manipulating Carrie, which is kind of new. It might well have been in the book, but it's kind of new for these movies. That kind of level of just psychodrama.
All the violence in the movie,
Yeah.
like I think that scene of her banging her head against the wall was probably the hardest thing for me to watch.
Yeah.
Or the beginning where she's almost going to kill her because she has the baby. She doesn't even know. I don't think that she's pregnant. Probably she has the baby, not realizing what's happening, and then the baby comes out, and she's going to kill it with these super sharp
scissors.
shears.
Oh, that part really was especially pointless for me. Plus, the other thing
it was pointless, but it was also really hard to watch because you never want to see a baby get ripped.
But that's part of what I also don't really like about this movie. It may work for other people, but it's constantly aware now that we're going to make Carrie definitely a horror movie, and we're going to shoot it this really specific way that we now think horror movies should be shot, and it all looks like a lot of other things that are shot this way.
Can you say more about that? I'm curious about that.
There's this whole the slow kind of follow up, how the handheld is done, but it's this deliberate, how the cuts are, how the zooms happen. There's a 2000s era way of shooting horror that looks like that. And it's just evidently how people have decided this is the look of horror. And if you dig on that, that is completely cool. And maybe everybody's like, hey, this is how you shoot a horror movie now. This is what audiences respond to. And that's fine too.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's ineptly shot because, we've seen movies like that. The way it's shot is not, it really hits it over the head. Like, by the way, everyone, horror movie, dun dun dun.
I think
I don't know.
Go ahead.
I'm not saying like this definitely looks like a lot of other things that come out. That's a completely valid criticism. But comparing that to a really obviously shoddy looking TV movie, I will take this any day of the week. Like
Well, the difference. Okay, so the Dutch angles and all of that in the previous one were definitely over the top. But there's a difference between budget allowing you to make it look better and how you lens and edit a movie.
No.
And budget has nothing to do with that, which I think is the biggest difference for me of this. This movie looks great, but it also has a lot of camera tropes that I don't know. And again, maybe it's on me because I watched so many movies. Like that's something I pay attention to. It's also part of my job.
No, I think that's a totally valid criticism. I'm saying I think the reason why I was probably more forgiving of that was because the version of this I watched was a TV movie. Like if I had gone from 76 to this, I probably wouldn't have been as nice about it.
I got you.
Here's my problem with that particular scene. The problem is there's no suspense to it because we know it's the beginning of the movie. We know that she's not gonna stab Carrie. So at most this is like, well, I know that Carrie survives this scene, so it's more like, what kind of details is it going to give me? What would have been interesting, and I know as long as we're going over the top, it would have been interesting if the baby's like eyes glowed and stopped the scissors. That would be cool. But I mean, other than that, she's not going to stab this baby. Baby's going to survive. We're just wasting time. We may as well just get on to the teenager and meet Carrie dealing with her mom.
I disagree that it's a waste of time. I didn't really like the scene, and I would have been happy for it not to be there. But what the point of it is just to show you that from the get-go, she is a troubled mother who's like not in this for joy and pleasure of motherhood. So I think that's the only point of it, but it's totally...
Yeah, but in that case, how many times can you see that? I mean, it's pretty damn obvious the first time that you see her interact with her daughter. Like, I don't need her to have almost killed her daughter at the beginning, and, they show... there's a lot of like really, to me, difference is the kind of fetishistic way they show all the gore and everything. They show, here we build up, we see your water broken, we see blood, there's blood on her, she's crying out, there's now scissors involved, and then each thing is like, really, this isn't your parents, Carrie, this is the new age where we show things like this. And again, like, if you like that, that's fine. Also, almost no one is going to be doing what we did, where we watched all 3 in a row before this. So you kind of notice things when you kind of back to back them, you notice things like that.
Yeah.
And you get, it doesn't matter. Like, none of that's like, I gotta agree with Jason. Like, it doesn't matter, because the first time you see them interact, you can see she's not a good mom and not a sane person. Like, okay, cool. That's awful. She had a baby alone, which I don't know if, I guess in this day and age probably would survive, but I don't know. It didn't,
sometimes,
to me, it doesn't bring anything.
Some babies do just pop out. I mean, that's true.
Of course.
But it's, who knows? Here's a question: what should have happened with Carrie? This is something I've been really wondering about. If Carrie's mom is this nutso, is she nutso enough that she could lose her daughter, or is she just nutso enough that basically you're like, boy, poor Carrie, she's got a crazy mom, but not like CPS level crazy.
Well, they already, the reason she's at school is because they said she couldn't be homeschooled anymore.
Yeah, that's a good point.
They do make it a point and say, hey, you're at school now. Like, you're not a weirdo the way you were used to be homeschooled. Why? Yeah. Also, but the net effect of that is also, why the hell are you at our school and you're still a weirdo and crazy, So yeah, nobody's getting a very, it's a disservice more than it is a service in kind of which sometimes happens.
We were talking about like what does Carrie deserve on the website, because people were getting into, just all the questions that we got into about insanity and what have you. And I think that Carrie's mom is, I don't know. There's something wrong with her. At the very least, she's abusive, and all I care about is what people do. At the very least, she's abusive, and she probably shouldn't have this daughter. But Carrie herself, Carrie is completely sane, and I want to get back to this when we finally.
How do you figure?
Carrie's sane. Carrie knows right from wrong.
Sane people don't kill dozens of people in like a rage.
Well, I mean, actually, that's the thing. I remember.
First of all,
there was the case
right
of
from wrong is not how we actually qualify sane and insane. That is a pop culture notion. And
okay,
true. But she is criminally.
My point is, it's not relevant.
Whatever she is.
I don't think. I think when I look at somebody like Carrie, I feel for her greatly. But I think, is she criminally liable? I think. Yeah, I think what we're looking at is criminally liable.
This version of her is debatably criminally liable. I can stand by that, because she is much more aware of her actions. Yeah. Although you still have a pretty strong case for her having post-traumatic stress. You have a strong case for her being, having other kinds of mental illness because of the abuse that she's done. Her mom in this is definitely insane and probably should not have custody of Carrie. But the thing is about the debate we were having about this last week, and the debate they continued online, is the things I find frustrating about anytime mental illness is portrayed in movies or whatever, is it's usually not actually based in real psychology. It's based off of things that other people have seen in other movies, and the horror genre, as much as I love it, is probably the most guilty.
Well, of course. I mean, because horror is built around exploitation. In the end, horror is about exploiting the things that people are scared of and believe in. So, I mean, I agree with you. I don't think anybody is spending a lot of time trying to think about, like, are motorcycle gangs really that violent, or are is mental illness treated this way or that way? But continue your thought.
Or like Middle Easterners with turbans, all of a sudden they are terrorists and everything.
Oh man, the last M. Night movie was one of those where, there's a lot of
I didn't see,
terrible, bad pop culture stuff, and I think the message that it ended up with by the end made me pretty pissed off. There's,
do you remember
was it Split? I think it's called.
Split? Yeah, but do you remember Twisted Nerve? I remember watching Twisted Nerve, and the fascinating thing was that it was this idea that mental retardation would lead to homicidal actions. It was crazy. It was really
I did
wild.
not remember that, and that's
And it was
awful.
like deeply like cynical and exploitative, and but I just sort of in the end just sort of let it go because I was like, this is just yet more exploitation. This is just
Yeah,
what.
you
Well,
both.
and sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, Drew, that you've made a really good point, and so is Jason. I mean, absolutely. I'm glad that you're here to raise the point that mental illness does not equal violent and terrifying. But I think what Jason's saying is also true that that people are scared of mental illness, and therefore, if you're showing a horror movie, if there's a mentally ill person, then that is going to be the scary thing in the film. And if there's a Middle Easterner, then they're going to be the terrorists because that's what people are afraid of. Or if there's a person with mental retardation, they're going to accidentally kill somebody or whatever. You know what I mean? It's just because that's what people are afraid of. And so it's not that we think that everybody is that way. It's just that we're bringing out.
I do think there are people that do think mental illness equates serial killer or maniac or.
Well, just like there are people who think that Islam equals terrorism.
Yeah.
It's the same
and
thing.
Look, it's as someone, I said this on the Facebook group, and I'm not gonna get up on too much of a soapbox because we still have a lot of ground to cover with this movie. I'm someone that lives with a mental illness every day, and I live it in a very, very real way. And it's a big struggle for me from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to sleep, and sometimes even while I'm asleep. And but to a lot of people around me, and in fact probably to a lot of the people that listen to this podcast, because I don't reference it very often, it's by and large invisible. And so it's hard, and it's been very hard for me the last few weeks. They hear all the political pundits and politicians tossing around the word mental illness, and that's suddenly now synonymous with spree shooter. And I'm not saying some of those people clearly are mentally ill, but ultimately, those people don't really care. It's just something that they can say. So, but they don't actually want to deal with the problem.
No, even if they have good intentions, those guys, I think, are using mental illness as a shorthand for a whole bunch of other ideas.
It's a scapegoat.
Maybe
I feel marginalized by that, and my struggle feels marginalized by it. And I'm not saying that Carrie, any version of Carrie, has the weight of having to always be sensitive to that, because all of these movies are very, I don't think Stephen King did a whole lot of reading on maybe he did, but I don't know if he did a whole lot of reading on abusive households and how that psychologically affects kids. I think he probably was just going on whatever he saw around him.
No, but remember, he was an alcoholic and he did no recovery, and yet he creates characters who are horrific, or whatever the word is. That they're like, I'm okay with
mentally ill. Look, I'm okay with mentally ill characters being even portrayed as horrific occasionally. Like one of my favorite recent TV shows is Bates Motel. However, what that show does do, even though ultimately it's a show about a serial killer, is they did do a lot of nuanced work about what it's like to have a dissociative disorder, and that it was very. In a lot of ways, they are very sensitive to the character of Norman Bates. And you could do, I'm not saying you have to, but you could do a version of Carrie that could, obviously that is not the choice they made. And the choice that they made after, 3 other versions of this story is to make Carrie less of a victim and, in my opinion, also a lot less sympathetic because her actions are more deliberate. But I mean, if the question of how guilty Carrie is, I still think even in this version, even though she is much more aware, I still think that's a debatable point. But even she does elicit a lot less sympathy for me in this version. But like I said, I could go on about this subject for literally hours because it's been on my mind a lot lately. But I don't want to monopolize realize all the time.
Well,
But
I mean, let me just steer it. I'm not going to shut you up. I was just wondering though, when it comes to this idea of criminal culpability, the cool thing is that can actually take in a great deal because somebody can be held not to be culpable for something they do because they don't know what they're doing, because they're literally completely, they can be because they don't know the nature of what they're doing. They can be held not liable because they don't know that they are doing it at the time. In other words, that they are just unaware, they are unconscious while they are doing something. And that, and then there are even mitigating factors like stuff that we used to call crimes of passion. Like you walk in, you see something utterly appalling and you do something criminal. That actually is less culpable in people's minds than if you plan ahead of time that you're going to go home in hopes that you will find somebody doing something that you're appalled by and then do something criminal. We think the second one is worse. So to the extent that so they're all and some of those things that I described people would call insane, and I don't even know what insane means exactly, but my point is some of those people would call insane because you're not and some people those other a lot of those other things are completely what you would call sane. They're just caught in a series of circumstances that are getting a result, and some of those results are punishable, and some of those results are not as punishable as if you were, say, a criminal mastermind like the kingpin, where you plan everything out. But I think on stupid Sunday morning news shows, I think people use these words, and I don't even think some of them are scapegoating, and some of them are just being lazy because they're just taking shortcuts.
when I said
And
scapegoating, I think I'm definitely talking about the last few weeks,
yeah.
which there's
Oh no, I'm
been a
with
lot
you.
of horror. Yeah,
Yeah.
but
No doubt about it.
I like I said, it's hard for me to not after a while get a little wrapped up in this, like it, because
Sure.
it's I've worked very, very hard to get where I am. Like
Yeah.
I was not particularly well in my 20s, and
Yeah.
I now have a very, I'm high functioning and I have a very good life for myself. But like there's a lot of people who aren't, and I think it's like I was saying in the last episode. I think it's very important. I think if we want society to change, that we are able to step out of ourselves and have sympathy for people like Carrie White, even though because what she does might make that be difficult.
I have
I guess.
so much sympathy for Carrie White, by the way. I mean, to me, just because I'm saying Carrie White is could possibly be liable for the things that she does, I still feel plenty sorry for her, and I still believe. See, because I'm such a big flaming liberal that I actually believe in compassion for everybody. That's my great. To me, it's not even the end of the conversation, like whether we decide that she's culpable. That's the beginning of the conversation, because we still have to figure out what are we going to do, and what do we as society owe to people like Carrie White. Which, by the way, if I step back for a second, that's a stupid question for us to be discussing when we're talking about the third remake of Carrie. I recognize it came out of my mouth, and then I was like, what am I talking about? What do we as a society owe Carrie White?
Well, and I think
Carrie White,
that changes with different interpretation. I think what we've now learned
Yeah.
is it depends on also the interpretation of Carrie White, because now there's four.
Yeah.
If we're going to count Carrie 2, there's 4 different versions of essentially this archetype.
Yeah. If you remember Carrie 2 was driven by anger, including anger with the foster system. What an interesting topic for that movie to be hitting on. Anyway, let's move on to the teacher. Judy Greer, who I love Judy Greer. Judy Greer plays Miss Desjardins, and she is, the teacher / coach who, as always, this is a teacher who really has her finger on the pulse of what's going on in this school, and I always find this character fascinating because I mean, there are some people, I think, who might even be uncomfortable with just how connected to the students Miss Desjardins is. She knows everything. She knows who they're dating. She knows, like how they're attacking one another, and everything. Julia, what were your thoughts about Judy Greer, or how she compared, say, to Betty Buckley in the first movie?
I think the whole point that the lawyer dad who shows up is who is Chris's father. When he shows up,
Yeah.
his whole point is, this teacher is awfully familiar with these kids, cussing in front of them and yelling at them and whatever. And I think that's probably true. I mean, I used to be a teachers union lawyer, and I can definitely tell you that I heard from plenty of teachers who were getting in trouble for various things that were similar to that. So I do think that that she is risking a lot when she starts, hollering at these people and telling them what they should be doing and what they shouldn't be doing with their classmates, aside from just saying you're not allowed to bully them, But I don't know. I think she's very similar to the teacher in
Betty Buckley?
the other versions. I didn't see her as that different because it's always about protecting Carrie and kind of teaching them a lesson. But I do think she probably oversteps a bit. But at the same time, you're rooting for her to do that because Chris is such a horrible person. You're just like, come on, So I don't know. I don't know how to differentiate her so much. I don't know if Tony and Drew have any additional thoughts about that.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, one thing I thought was interesting about her is when she gets wind of this plan that is always the turning point in this film, where she gets wind of the plan for Sue Snell, who we'll talk about in a minute, to have Tommy take Carrie to the prom. She says the most interesting thing. She goes, "Tommy, don't you think you're going to look ridiculous when you show up at that prom with Carrie White on your arm?" And I always thought, first of all, what an offensive thing to say about Carrie, but actually, what a smart thing to say, because it means that Miss Desjardins understands the politics of this school just as well as these kids do. And, that's, and she even knows how to communicate with them. She doesn't say that because she is secretly against Carrie by any means. She's saying it because she's telling the truth. She's like this is trouble, and it, you know. And I really like it. I think I kind of liked the friendliness of the 2002 Miss Desjardins, but this this teacher, Judy Greer, she seemed pretty real, and I liked that moment. There was one more where she showed up that I thought was fascinating. Oh yeah. Well, when we get to the final prom, she actually survives, because a big piece of the prom is always the interaction between Sue Snell and Miss Desjardins, two people who are basically observers in the catastrophe at the prom, even though they're present. So that takes us to the girls. The Yet again, we have the all girls are against Carrie, but one begins to feel for her and becomes her ally, although they don't really have many scenes together, if any. I'm having a hard time thinking of any. Sue and Carrie versus Chris, the horrible, queen bee, versus Carrie. Talking about Chris, I thought this was like one of the most realistic Chris's I've ever seen. This is a really talented actress, Portia Doubleday, I think it is, and
Yeah, I agree.
she really, you believe her rage. She's a horrible kid. I mean, there's something, it's funny. I almost said there's something wrong with her, and then I thought back on the conversation I just had with Drew, and I was like, actually, let me just stop saying things like that. This kid is really troubling. The things she does troubles me. and it doesn't even matter. Is Chris Hargensen insane? Who cares? She is sadistic. She's really mean, but I believed
Well, but I
this
loved.
actress.
I want to say that I loved it that in this film, because it's 2013, we have all of the, like we were talking about it earlier. We touched on a bit. Somebody, I think it was Tony, on the cyberbullying piece.
Yeah.
And here, I love that she's the one who she filmed Carrie in the shower, and then she posted it and shared it, and
Yes.
and she's like the kind of the ringleader. And so when the dad is in the office, the teacher's able to get out of her spot by saying, well, this is pretty simple fix. I mean, if in fact your daughter, filmed this, like, because there's a film of this going around, if she's the one who did it, then then that's a problem. But if she's not, it should be easily remedied by just looking at her phone. And she's just like, I mean, talk about like her face just turns white. She's like, no, I don't want them looking at my phone. And then he's like, it's simple. It's simple. Let's just get this done, because he really believes his daughter. And then she's like, no, and she runs off, and she's just like so scared. And I feel like that's such a realistic. Given that I have a teenage daughter who, I swear, the one way I can make her cry by like flipping a switch is by taking her phone, and that's the only thing that makes her cry, really. It's like, you take her phone and it's like, oh my gosh, it's the worst thing that's ever happened to anybody in the history of man. So I totally love.
But people also
that scene.
really fear being found out and being.
Well, yeah, but even I'm just saying, even if it wasn't that, she'd still be like, even if it wasn't being found out for that particular thing, she would still not want them to see what she does do with her phone, because what teenager wants that? They want their privacy. So I just thought that was a really interesting scene.
Interesting. That's different from how I read that scene, because I saw it just as her great fear of being discovered.
Oh, absolutely.
Literally
for sure,
for
that's
this
what
crime.
the point is. But I'm saying, even if she hadn't filmed the scene, she'd still be mortified at them looking at her phone. But she obviously did. We know she did. I mean, we know she has it on her phone, and she is going to be found guilty.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Anyway, I thought that Portia Doubleday was really good. Sue here, remember, Sue is played by Amy Irving in the original movie. Here, and Amy Irving, basically, and this is true almost of everybody in the cast. Everybody here is Hollywood beautiful in 2010's terms, whereas Amy Irving had a sort of nice scrubbed freckliness that was sort of befitting of the early 70s. And this Sue is just model gorgeous. I mean, she looks like she's a cover girl. And nevertheless, she's a talented actress, and you really believe her when she decides she's going to do something nice. Somebody even says something about, when Portia Doubleday says, hey, Carrie's here at the prom, she goes, your girl looks good, meaning everybody has already internalized what exactly is going on. That Sue's decided she's going to do a nice charitable thing for Carrie. It's as simple as that. Everybody's down with that plan. But Sue, I mean, I none of these are bad performances. I think that's what we're saying. I do want to get to the prom.
Well, when one thing you do need to say about Sue is that I didn't buy, because I kind of liked how the other Sue from the TV series goes to her house to check on her and rescues her from the tub and all that. This one, I felt like I didn't buy it when she goes to the house, because it just didn't. They hadn't really built that relationship up.
That's a really good point.
Well,
like Tony
really
says,
weird.
this is
given that she's just seen Carrie go nuts, and she's actually seen Carrie go nuts. Whereas the Sue in the other film, she wasn't there. She just sees Carrie walking on the street at the gas station, but she doesn't know exactly what's happened. But this one has seen Carrie, just kill the crap out of everybody, and she's still going to show up at her house. I would be like, no, I'm not going anywhere near that person, because even if I feel like we had a connection before, I'm really afraid of her now. I would think that would be the case.
There's no scenes. It's so funny. Like Tony said, this is the Reader's Digest condensed version of Carrie. We don't have any scenes between Sue and Carrie.
Yeah.
We do have the goofy putting on tuxes scene that Brian De Palma created. So we have that.
Yeah.
But there's not a single
that
Sue
was
and Carrie.
very again, the music in that montage is another kind of very 2000s thing, which, if you're going to update something, that's what you do, right? But
I guess so.
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
This definitely feels very thoroughly of its time, and in some ways that's probably gonna grate on people of a certain age, but in some ways I think that it's also befitting of movies that are about. Every one of these has felt very much of their time, including the original Carrie, and because this is about teenagers, that's, I think, you kind of have to do that. I think this movie uses technology in really interesting ways that none of the other ones were able to do.
As far as an update, it fits. Like, it doesn't feel cringy. There's not, to me, and I look for that kind of thing and have to deal with that kind of stuff all the time and working in technology. And there isn't kind of buzzwords just for the sake of buzzwords. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a few years, but it's still not, even though they put it up on YouTube, there's not a, hey, let's mention this because kids will get it. Like,
Yeah.
oh,
yeah.
you totally have to Instagram that. What?
Oh my God.
Is
Yeah.
that Snapchat? Like, there's none of that. It's like they put it up, you see what it is. It doesn't, because a lot of movies will do that. Like, what are the kids into? Well, let's mention it because they won't know if you don't, you know.
Well,
And so
maybe
they
because of
never
how they
fall for
use
that.
it,
And I thought that was really
blocks
good.
that.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
like, nobody, like, oh, we got to show we're down with all the hip new forms of bullying.
Yes.
Because that's
But
kind
it-
of
but it
like
totally
it's kind of
is.
universal, though. I mean, the fact we have in it, it's I mean, if before, like, I guess cyberbullying, it would be Polaroids or some kind of
Yes.
instantaneous or photocopying things. But the methods of bullying have merely flowed. The problem is, like most things, that it's so much easier to get to a mass amount of people, which is terrifying.
Yeah.
Also makes me really glad in a lot of ways that maybe I was born when I was born. I think.
Well, that's
Well, yeah,
another
My
really.
younger years are even more cringe-inducing, which is terrifying to me now that I think about it.
I mean, kids. That's the other crazy thing is teenagers don't even really have the full use of their faculties. To a great extent, not only are they drunk on hormones, and anybody who's going to deny that is plumb lying, but they don't even have the full use of a completely developed prefrontal cortex. They lack adult brains. They lack the ability to make all the decisions that we're expected to make, and yet they have the ability to ruin their own lives and other people's lives with these technologies that we've never really questioned whether we should just hand everybody, so yeah, she can take a picture of a girl having a big emotional breakdown naked in a shower, and she can post it online, and she can ruin her own life and everybody else's life, and there's really nothing we can do to stop that. It's amazing. That is a mind-blowing horror that even Stephen King never really anticipated. It just blows my mind.
Like, that's true horror. But actually, that kind of stuff is
Yeah,
what does stick
absolutely.
with me. Like, I'm sure at some point, because I'm even thinking about this, I'll have some nightmare where everything I
Yeah.
did that was super stupid in retrospect is now on the internet. Good grief.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, but I mean,
yeah.
we
And
are
there's been
now
lots of great books
like
about it.
living in the horror of that, because like people are being we hear about this every day. People are being judged about things that they did on the internet. And now the internet's been around long enough, 5-10 years ago, because nothing ever goes away, and yet people aren't static, so they change.
Yeah.
And
They change. Yeah.
you may have said, and in some cases this is being used for good, in some cases this is being used for ill, but people may have said something they now regret, and you can recall that tweet or recall that blog or whatever and throw it up in their face. And there's a lot of instances I don't always necessarily think that is, when it happens to politicians, I usually laugh.
True. I think people can change in an afternoon. I think I can get up this morning and be really pissed off about something, say something truly nuts, and thank God I'm not on film or don't have a 3-hour in the morning radio program, because there's, and then in the afternoon I go, what in the world was I thinking? That was a ridiculous thing to say. But I mean, here it's worse because they're teenagers.
Right, and when you do that with like people in your life, then you can later on go, I'm sorry I'm sorry I said that. I shouldn't have said it. I take it back, and I apologize. But with the internet, now it's out there. You can't apologize or take it back to the whole world of people.
Well, I guess that's exactly what happens to Sue Snell here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that she's like, well, like there's the conversation in the movie where she's like, well, you were right there. You were, saying plug it up. You were throwing tampons, and she's like, yeah, but I stopped.
Yeah.
And so like that's somebody changing in the course of an instance. They realize what they're doing while it's happening is messed up.
I think that's completely believable. I mean,
but the consequences can be lifelong. I mean, like if you decide for 1 minute that you're going to get no car drunk, that's the minute that kills somebody. That's all. And then your life and their lives are completely over. And so it's the same thing here. It's like, yeah, she stopped, but the injury is done. And just because Chris's injury is worse, the one that that she inflicts on Carrie, it doesn't make Sue's thing just go away. And so yes, she's going
That's
to
why
try to make up
that's
for
why
it.
Sue's trying to
Make
turn
amends.
over a new leaf. Uh, there's some great books about this, by the way. There's one called "So You've Been Publicly Shamed," which just talks about this other phenomenon that nobody has really, well, this book does, but that doesn't get acknowledged very much, which is also a weird mob mentality. Like, let's say, Drew, that for some reason you and I are on a stage in Dallas and we say something that completely offends some person or group. And so there becomes this sort of Twitter backlash against us. And it becomes a super popular Twitter backlash. In the end, it will spin frenzied, out of control, building on itself, way out of proportion to whatever it was, whatever dumb thing that we said on stage. By the way, this didn't happen. Although I guess
No, but it did. But it didn't happen to you in this regard. But it has happened a lot
Yes.
in regard to this Me Too movement, and I can say that as a woman, that I have found that some of the things have been everybody getting on board with Me Too and saying, oh, and by the way, like the Aziz Ansari one is a good example. It's like, wait a minute, wait, that's not the same. I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with his behavior. I'm saying that's not the same level as Harvey Weinstein. It's just completely in another universe. But now we're all on this adrenaline rush of like, yeah, and you're bad, and you're bad, and you should be ashamed. And I'm like, okay,
Boy.
let's take it easy for a minute
Wait,
and not try
Julia,
to shame
here's
every
what I
single
love.
person.
Julia, you see a door marked danger and you just walk right through. That's the that's the amazing thing. You're like, you know what I'm going to talk about? The Me Too movement. That was amazing.
Yeah, but I get to because I'm a girl.
And here comes the Castle of Horror Twitter backlash.
Oh,
But that would be, it is exactly what we were talking about, though. It
Yes,
is exactly what we're talking
that is
about.
that would be the irony.
I am going to stick with my take on things where definitely I'm an ally, definitely I haven't seen anything, but I'm also a dude, and unless specifically asked, I am going to leave it to the smarter, much more capable women in my life to like comment and or smooth over and or take this.
Me too, man. Not going anywhere near it. It's all good. Yeah.
I think this although I think this, if we're gonna go, hats off to Stephen King and hats off to the various, even though like they're not always the highest quality productions, hats off to the people who have adapted this particular story, because they all have managed to adapt it into their times, and it's always given us something very timely to talk about. Now, four times, three times in a row, and I think the movies that we have watched, these are not movies that I think I will revisit often, but the conversations we have had because of these different versions of Carrie have been great in the context of our time.
Yeah.
That's so one difference on this one. I wonder what you think. The addition of Sue probably being pregnant in this and how it affects closer to the end.
I think that's pointless too. I don't get the point of that.
Okay. One vote for pointless. Yeah, I was like, okay, I guess that's something.
Who cares? I mean, they're not sisters. They're not. There's no family, so it doesn't matter. There's nothing. Unless there's a special.
That seemed like a weird choice.
Yeah, it seems so random.
I was
like, it kind of looks at one point like she kind of saves her because of that, or she's supposed to have a different look on it because when she comes across the murdered mother, I don't know. That all was just a strange addition that I set it up.
It's not going anywhere. It could have. I think it's a half-baked idea that didn't actually get done. I think because there's some kind of connection between Carrie being psychically connected to this baby of Sue Snell, but it doesn't actually get done because they're telling it. This is like a 99-minute movie. They just don't have time for it. If you had decided, for instance, that for some reason Sue was a long lost sister, then maybe somewhere, but other than that, it's like, oh, how interesting. It's a girl. Here, let me save your life. That's, by the way, back to the Bride with White Hair, where her whole philosophy was, men, I see one, I kill one, but she wouldn't kill women. And so, great, she's decided she's she's going to save Snoo, especially Snoo,
Why
especially
just keep this new?
Snoo.
This new character.
especially because
The
I think you're on a Dr. Seuss kick right now for some reason.
new.
New cells, seashells by the seashore.
She's totally psychic.
No, yes, indeed. Just psychic. Okay, I want to get to the rampage, but first, I have this to say about the prom, and this is going to sound. This is going to sound like I'm betraying some of the things I've said previously, but I went back and I looked at the 1976 prom, and we just watched the 2013 prom. And here's the problem, is that using his camera angles and the music and the many different like eye contact and all the different things, Brian De Palma just wipes the floor with everybody else. I mean, he just
Oh yeah.
it's there's just
Well, it's funny
there's
because
just
I'm not.
no-
I'm
Huh?
not. I've been. And I kind of go off on that movie when we're watching it when we did it way back in one of our early Stephen King retrospectives.
Yeah.
I kind of went off on that movie a little bit, but the more I've seen different adaptations of Carrie, the more I appreciate that one. Like I owe you an apology, Brian De Palma.
Yeah. If you look at that prom scene, just the business of Sue showing up and then slowly figuring out in a scene that has no actual sound, it just has music. Sue figures out there's something weird going on. She's kind of reaching around the stage looking, and she realizes there's wires. He has a feather or like a streamer drop from where the bucket is, so it tells us where the bucket is going to drop. Everything is just so expertly done. Now, I know it might be the dumbest thing I've ever said on the show to go, turns out Brian De Palma, master of suspense. But I mean, seriously, it is amazing. And I think the big problem is that everybody wants to do it differently, and they have to. They don't have much choice, right? But there's just so far they have not been able to overcome just how well
No.
done that prom
In my
sequence was.
head, I think of the Brian De Palma one as it's like when you have a Disney film, like you have Disney Cinderella, and then you have a bunch of knockoff DVD Cinderellas. That's how I think of this. Like I think of the De Palma Carrie as the real one, and not just the original one, but the real one. And then the other ones are just the DVD knockoffs. You know what I mean? So I don't think of it as fair even to compare them. If that makes sense.
It's very possible. I mean, so anyway, getting to what's going on here in this version, the way that they differentiate themselves is just how Carrie reacts. Because there's also the problem of we've seen it 1,000 times, we know what's going to happen. So in this case, Sue is trapped because Miss Desjardins sees that Sue has shown up. Sue shows up because she knows something bad is going to happen, because she knows that Chris is going to do something bad. Sue shows up, Miss Desjardins kicks her out, and so Sue is behind a security locked pair of doors when everything goes down, and then we get to the amazing freak out. Like I said, the Bride with White Hair version of Carrie, where she floats into the air and raises her arms, and it would have been complete actually if like crackling fire had been coming out of her hair.
Well, that's the thing. It's more. She's more of a witch. Like it's not.
Yes.
I don't mean a witch like a Wiccan. I mean a witch like a traditional. Like the kind of witch that was in again Disney movies. Yeah, she is definitely. Wicked in that way, and but I really liked, and it's the contrast is, I liked the stiff-armed thing from before, but I also really liked how she was choreographing, how she was conducting this, like it was a symphony. I thought it was really interesting.
It also made me think about the difference between when Jean Grey goes in the X-Men comics goes from Phoenix to Dark Phoenix.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's definitely this one is strangely because it is also more horror, but it's also kind of superhero-y in a way.
Yeah.
Not that she does anything heroic, but the way her powers are presented are very much it seems like something could have been in a Marvel movie.
Yeah, or like I said, I feel like it's like Anakin, just kind of going wicked.
Yeah.
Well, there's like
You
this
were the
whole
chosen
shockwave.
one.
There's a whole telekinetic shockwave thing.
Yeah, that was cool.
And
Yeah.
it's all done really well, especially when you look at the TV version where they kind of outpace themselves.
Yeah.
There's stuff exploding everywhere. When she's tracking down the car, she creates like a fissure, an earthquake fissure. Where she lifts the car. But again, like some of the gore is just this extra like works. It's horror, but did we need to see slow motion twice? One with her face stuck through the windshield.
The windshield.
And then she chucks it into a gas station that explodes. Like all of it just felt very, well, we have to up the ante.
Yeah, it was over the top for Carrie. For Carrie to do that.
I think everybody is all these filmmakers are just chasing the Hulk out that Carrie has in the book, because that's never quite been captured on film. And
tell us more about that. I don't remember, Drew.
Well, like Carrie basically devastates the town in the book. Like she has a total, like I said it, Incredible Hulk moment. And like I feel like all the different movie versions have tried to kind of capture that energy, and none of them have. Like the Palma's version may be the best movie version of Carrie, but they just didn't have the technology at that point to do that.
Yeah.
This movie has the technology, but they don't necessarily have the ambition really to fully do it. They do a better job, I think, than just about any other movie version we've seen. But this movie isn't, like, if this movie has one great sin, is that it isn't that ambitious. Like it's just another, I think you made the comment about Jason, about how like kind of watching all these versions is kind of like seeing a different version of a Shakespeare play. And this, having seen all the versions of Carrie now, I think that's definitely the case, is because there's never really, like, some little things are different, but there's never that much of an attempt to stray that far from what people expect. And I kind of
because the movie you raise a good point. I because I keep forgetting that she basically destroys the whole town, and looking it up now, it says 440 people die, and in the movie it's always prom, she goes out walking, there's a gas station and a car. That's pretty much it. Those are the beats. And they are here. Tony, I agree with you. The girl's face coming through the windshield was a bit much. Although
they're having horror fun with it, and I get it, but all of it, I guess, it kind of does go back. Drew, either give us the whole rampage or not. I don't know.
He could. She could have. Can you imagine if she had just
impressed by, like, I don't know. I would like to see more of the rampage. And why doesn't she just get killed when she stops the car? That's fine. I'm fine with that. Yeah. But there's a whole other, like, you've already got revenge. There's a whole extra double super duper revenge that I don't know. It doesn't do it for me, but
you're right. I would have liked it if she had gone through and like, and here's that bar that my mom always complains about. Rah, It would be kind of cool. Can you imagine her just floating through the town going, Rah! like one of the Dark Knights in the Lord of the Rings, with like glowing black eyes.
Sure.
Yeah, like Dark Willow, basically. So, well, unfortunately, I guess they're going to have to remake Carrie yet again, just to do that.
No. They should just do the musical. Just do the musical this time. That would be different. There's a stage musical. I just learned that. Jamie told me about that a day or so back, and I was like, if they're gonna do it again, it's like when they remade Evil Dead, and I was kind of like, they should have just done the stage musical, because that would be different, I mean, I know there's a lot of horror fans that would be like, oh no, a musical, but like when you see like how many different versions of this, you're kind of just like, well, what could you do different with this? Fuck it, singing.
By the way, I haven't seen that, but some of those have been great. Like the musical version of Reefer Madness is hilarious. So I don't know. Is it a serious musical or is it a parody? Like, what is it?
I have no idea. It seems like it's semi-serious. I mean, so it's not quite the way the Evil Dead
like Sweeney Todd
musical
kind
is.
of style.
Yeah,
Sweeney
but
Todd?
I mean,
Yeah,
Okay.
the movie is. I was trying to think if
Yeah,
Sweeney Todd was a musical.
Yes. Yes, it is.
I'm I'm having a hard time envisioning singing and dancing in this story. But it's kind of like, well, fuck it. They should just do that. If they have to do this again, if they have to trot this out as a movie, either do something that's, as close to the book as they can get it, and just like try to ignore best they can all the previous film versions, or do something crazy and ambitious.
I was just thinking, actually, you could turn this more into like a 13-hour miniseries by taking other elements from other Stephen King books. Like, for instance, he introduces in one of his stories this group made up of psychics who do nothing but wander the back roads looking for other psychics because they want to kidnap them and make them into government assassins. It'd be interesting. You could just start like gathering all these people around this town of Chamberlain, Maine, because they know that there's a girl around here who's about to go supernova. And of course, the 13th episode would still be the supernova. But you could, you could build all kinds of stuff. And I would love to see just an hour.
Or we could go completely lowbrow with it and just do Carrie versus Pennywise.
Well,
I mean,
why not? Yes.
Let's just go, completely lowbrow. If they're gonna trot this out again, and you're probably right, they probably will. Let's either go really different or just completely tasteless. I want to see Carrie White go down in the sewer in Derry and duke it out with Pennywise.
I'm down with that.
Let's just
get
get dumb with it.
Just do it and change the names. By the way, just you could write that tomorrow. So, okay. We should wrap it up. I want to get our final thoughts on Carrie and also this interesting perspective of watching all these versions of the same story. Although we've touched on it already.
We also have to go with the hey, look now. Sue is dressed as how alternative people dress when they go to a funeral and sees the tombstone with a terrible "Is she really dead?" cracks the tombstone with a terrible sound effect and camera push ending, which is infinitely worse in my opinion than the hand sticking up, which has been aped and is part of horror consciousness forever. I
was really rooting for the hand.
Oh man, that whole ending. I'm glad that level of cheesiness is at the very end, because I almost did the equivalent of table flip. Is that cheesy.
It's completely out of step with the rest of the movie. Because the rest of the movie is not that cheesy, and that's
everybody's doing a good job and everything, and they decided to do this one of the dumbest endings. I'd forgotten about that, and then I saw it. I was like, oh yeah, that stupid thing. Why even? Like it's somehow terrible and touching and fitting that they would graffiti her grave because they don't. She does go homicidal, and it killed their high school friends, and people wouldn't understand because they didn't see her mother enough to know, and she's killed her mom, so they're probably going to go side with the mom. Like, look, you raised this kid, and she was a homicidal maniac at the end. Even if I don't.
It doesn't matter how bad a mom you have. Everybody's going to be pissed off if you kill all their classmates.
Right.
That's true.
And so the graffiti and everything is like, oh wow, yeah, that's definitely how people react. Oh no, crazy sound effect shattering, blah. Ugh.
She's a lot like Candyman now for this town. For the town, she's a legend.
Right.
Carrie White Burns in Hell is just probably going to be something that people are painting all over town.
It'll be on a water tower, that's for sure. There's no way it's not on a water tower somewhere around.
Oh man, think about this, Tony. If you went to that school and like 20 years ago, this girl Carrie White killed everybody at the prom, not you necessarily, maybe, but I mean, Can you imagine? You'd be the girl or the guy who decides to, as your senior project, write a play based on Carrie. I mean,
Sure.
this would be like the most important thing that ever happened in this town.
There would be pig's blood tails and stuff.
Yes.
Regardless, somebody
Yeah.
might paint on the water tower with pig's blood because they thought that was somehow weird and funny, and
all that. Yeah,
all
there'd
of that
be
would
reporters
happen.
coming around all the time saying we're doing an 8-year retrospective on
Well, yeah,
Carrie.
it's like Halloween when they
Also,
go and
where she
talk to-
folds her house into the ground.
Yes.
Which
I don't think
interesting,
she dies, by the
but
way. I mean, I think she's not really dead is the other thing. I mean, not only is underground, but I think she actually didn't even get crushed by this, because she can telekinetically move everything around her. So why would she get crushed?
Well,
there's
this
no
ending,
telekinesis for not breathing.
I don't know. This ending seems to suggest she could
all of that whole grave scene. It's as dumb, if not dumber, than the one from Carrie 2 with the ghost terrible CG shattering. Because now everything else looks great, and why does that look so crappy?
Yeah.
Just, oh man, that was terrible.
I
don't understand it, because there's so many good bits. Even like I said, if I think it's just doesn't do much different and it's just an update, and that's fine. But that part, that I really had forgotten about, and then remembered. It was sad that I had to watch that part again, because it adds nothing, not a bit. They don't even show Sue's kid. Like, hey, she could have brought her kid. Hey, this is, this bad thing happened. Be nice to people, kid. There's not even a poignancy of that.
There is an ending. There is an ending that was shot and is included on the DVD, which I have not seen, which somehow involves the baby and a nightmare and a waking up and a hand flying out from. I don't know.
Oh man, that sounds worse.
Yeah,
I'm gonna pretend the one where she leads the kid, or has the kid, and the kid's too young, and she, goes to visit the grave and says something poignant, and it's sad. It's sad that there's graffiti on the grave, but that's necessary for the town to heal. I'm going to pretend that was it, and not the really just idiotic ending that's there. And it cuts, of course it does, cut to the music, because it's the 2000s music, and we got to highlight that. Kudos to the band if you get your stuff on a soundtrack. I'm not,
for sure,
not knocking that, but just the way, oh man.
I was just wondering what this would be like if the favorite of the show, if Rob Zombie had filmed Carrie.
Oh, don't put that in the universe. Don't. No, now it's gonna happen. Well, I guarantee you it's gonna have some rednecks in it.
Can you imagine what a Dayglow nightmare? How many
what? Here's the only way it works. Why am I even saying this? Why am I putting this out in the universe? I'll go ahead, because it would be like in the compound in Waco, some rednecks, sort of like British Davidians, have a psychic girl and they abuse her, and then this stuff happens because then she has to go to high school. Then we'll have a whole lot more redneck. And
Carrie's mom would be played by Sherry Moon.
Hell yeah, Sherry Moon.
Actually, probably now we'll have Sherry Moon will play both Carrie and her mom. Just because, why wouldn't you double down? Oh man,
Sid Haig would be the principal. Yeah, no, I God bless. There'd be like giant styrofoam heads at the prom for no reason.
Sid Haig was the principal at a high school, none of those kids would ever act out because they would all be terrified. Let's be realistic here.
Now you know what I want, just because I have now this even more morbid curiosity. So Sid Haig was in a 70s sci-fi show called Jason of Star Command.
Yeah, I was.
And we get Rob Zombie's Jason of Star Command, because I'm absolutely fascinated by what that would be, of all things.
I used to watch Jason of Star Command.
No, I loved it as a kid, but I didn't know I didn't understand I didn't point out people rewatching it. Oh man, Sid Haig, cool.
I have not watched.
He's a great character actor. He's awesome. I really like his work, but I just talking about this all just reminded me, what would a Rob Zombie Jason of Star Command be?
Was he the bad guy? Was he Dragos?
Yeah,
was
man.
Wow.
Monocle, crazy laser monocle and all.
haven't watched Jason the Star Command since it was on the air. So
I doubt
I
it
guess
holds
that's
up.
that's the internet hole that I'm going to need to go down this I don't know, sometime this week. But we need to wrap this up. Julia, make sense of all of this, please. What what try like thinking not about Sid Haig, not about Rob Zombie's surely superior but as yet unfilmed Carrie. Talking about Carrie 2013 and all things Carrie. What are your thoughts? Because this is the last time we're going to talk about this series.
Yeah, I think I didn't read the book, and now I regret. Or maybe if I read it, it was a very, very long time ago, and I don't recall reading it. Because, I don't think I did. So now I feel like I kind of want to read it and see how this all differs from the book. And I'm glad that you guys have been speaking to that a little bit. I think it's really interesting to look at the different ways a horror version of PTSD after parental abuse is portrayed, because everyone has, at least, even if not their own parents, somebody in their life who had, some kind of abusive childhood, and you've seen how that affects people. So if it's not you and your own dealing with it, it's like you're somebody that you're close to, and you've seen like, wow, this person's really effed up because of how their parents were, and nobody, with a few exceptions, which of course have become very famous in the media lately, goes well. And again, I have a hard time not using the word crazy, but I'm trying to be mindful of it after Drew has pointed out that it's not the same. But, they go ballistic or whatever and start killing everyone in their school. That is not a thing that is natural and normal to happen just because you have bad parents. It's not supposed to be that way, and so there is something wrong there. And the question is, in the light of the conversation that we have been having in our culture, what is it that happens that flips the switch in your brain that you go, oh, people are mean to me, my parents are mean to me, I am miserable, and so therefore everyone must die. Why does that happen? And so it's been an interesting exploration, I think, in our conversations and just looking at these movies in that context, to see all of that. And, just seeing how bullying affects people in different generations, and it's the same, but it's different. How being a teenager, even if you're played by a 26-year-old, affects things. I don't know. It's been a really interesting conversation all around. So I'm glad we did this series.
Good. I'm glad. Who's next? Drew, what are your thoughts?
Well, I thought this movie was just okay, as I said in my opening thoughts, and I don't think this conversation has really changed that in any way. I do find myself wondering, in response to what Julia just said, if we had done this, because this was a fan request, and we try to get to those as the best we can. I do kind of wonder if we've gleaned a lot from a bunch of basically mid-tier, not amazing horror films. And I kind of wonder if that's because of the moment we are at, and if we would have actually had these conversations discussing these same series of movies a few years back. And I gotta say that the answer is probably no. I mean, there might have been some of the stuff that we would have talked about, but I mean, we really are at a moment, I think, culturally with a lot of this stuff. And the conversations we've had throughout all of these movies have been great, and I hope our readers enjoy it or don't. I mean, opinions will vary, but I really have enjoyed the conversations, and I found them very cathartic after, kind of being put through an emotional meat grinder with all the stuff that's in the media. So I hope people listening to this also find it cathartic. The movie itself, it's purely mid-tier. It's not anything amazing, but I'm glad we watched it, and I'm glad we had this conversation.
Excellent. Tony, did we let's return to you, because I lost the plot of what we were talking about beforehand.
Well,
so
I mean, I have a few things. Well, I think that if you made this movie now, I don't know if you would make it now in light of recent events. The idea of somebody snapping and doing all these terrible things, or maybe it's more relevant. I'm not sure. I think it's interesting. I found myself going back to the fact that this was a fan request and how much I was really not looking forward. I want to do fan requests, but this one was very, in my mind, I disliked these way more than I actually did upon second viewing, which is really good because I hate to disappoint. You know, if somebody's very adamant, I dig these movies, you guys should do these. Or maybe they're just trying to stir the pot. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But I did enjoy them. I enjoyed our discussions even more. I think there's a lot of relevance, and I don't know exactly how I would, if I wanted to, if this got remade again, what would be the cultural relevance, and would you even do it? Is it something, like we talked about last time? Is this a topic that people would want to see on screen? Perhaps not, given light. I also want to go back, and I know we've talked about this before, but after earlier talking about how everything is permanent on the internet, I just now realized, like, after all of this, I have this nightmare of going to a horror convention. You meet Rob Zombie, and like, man, I love your music. Like, Sexual Sister is one of my favorite albums. I think you're a brilliant short form director. I love your art direction. Great. Thanks for everything you do. And he goes, "Oh, you're that motherfucker from the Castle Horror podcast. Yeah, I bet you like my stuff. You guys never cease to rank on me, jackass. Get the fuck out of here. I bought and sold a billion albums. Like, you'll never work in the town again. You were terrible. I've listened to your podcast until you started ranking on me, you jackass." And just laying no matter what I could do about, like, man, I love your music. I think that your direction, your art direction is great. I think you did a lot for horror and brought this all up. Because this is permanent on this show. I know, especially as a musician. That'd be a good problem to have if
Rob Zombie knows about this podcast.
I know, but you never know. The world is small. I'm totally screwed as a musician, despite the fact I love many things Rob Zombie, except when it comes around to what we talk about that we dislike. And I just know, because you're always going to respond.
Yes.
No matter how many times you hear good things about what you do.
Yeah.
Human brains go, I know personally I do, dwell on the negative, right? You can get a million, like, man, I'm going to play your music on this podcast. I'm going to play your music on the internet. I'm going to give you a great review of your music or your podcast. And it's that one person who's like, I think you all suck and you're terrible.
Right.
Yeah.
Even if you have hundreds of great reviews of anything. So I just, since the
Or
permanence of the internet, I just now have this irrational fear that oh man.
You have like a performance review at work, and it's like everything about you is great on the performance review, and then there's like one thing, and the one thing is what you obsess over for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Something at a horror. You'd probably be a horror convention. Oh, hey, here, look who's here. Oh man, what's up? Like, love your stuff. Oh, this jackass.
Yeah.
Get him out of here.
Can you?
Like, I just, it's probably gonna happen one day.
Okay, so to the audience, if you know Rob Zombie, tell him that he is literally one of our favorite performers and musicians.
Oh, there's so much awesome, and yet,
no doubt about it.
It comes up not even how I would want it to come up, and it's terrible. And I'm the worst hypocrite about it.
Rob Zombie's movies have had so much negative static on the internet. I think he just wipes his tears away with $100 bills. And
I know, but you know how it is, man.
Curls up in his spooky mansion that probably looks exactly like how he wants it to, and he does not give a shit.
No, I know, but you don't want to be like,
he's Rob Zombie and he's cool like that.
I'm with you.
I don't know, but it's just what we were talking about, and since that came up, I just realized, oh man, we are what we hate.
I'm with you. I have to say though, I loved, and I'm the only person I know who went this way, but I really loved Lords of Salem. Loved it. To me,
there's a lot
that was like, he needs to make
Can we
more like
do
Lords of Salem.
endorsements now?
Yeah.
Yes, let's do our endorsements. Actually, before we go to endorsements, I have one that's from the whole group, which is Nicole Loftus was the fan of the show who said, "I think you should do the Carrie retrospective," and she was so right. That Drew is exactly right. This became a conversation that I don't think any of us would have anticipated, it was really great. So Nicole, thank you very much. It was awesome. So yeah, let's do our endorsements. Drew, do you have anything to endorse this week?
I have one actual endorsement and one self-serving plug, but I watched this last week a 2-hour and 20-minute documentary called "You're So Cool, Brewster: The Making of Fright Night." And,
oh, that sounds great.
Those of you who have been with us since we were the Castle Dracula podcast will know that I am a big fan of the Fright Night films, and this is a really great documentary. It's exhaustive. Like it's more Fright Night trivia than you'll probably ever know. In fact, even as a fan of there was something that I learned even as both a fan of Ghostbusters and Fright Night. I learned some new things because they had some of the same special effects people on both films. And the giant animatronic bat skeleton at the very end is a refitted version of the library ghost in Ghostbusters. So I learned
cool.
something about two of my favorite 80s movies that I did not know, and I'm kind of like, man, I am so glad I know that. But it's a really great documentary. It's done, I guess, by the same people who did the Crystal Lake Memories and Never Sleep Again. So it's got that kind of same style about it, and it's just really, really, really wonderfully done, and a good love letter to one of the better 80s horror films, and definitely one of the better vampire movies to come out in my lifetime. My self-serving endorsement, or I guess I should say plug, it is South by Southwest is upon us. So next Sunday, March 11th, I will be back at Flamingo Cantina for Punk versus Rockabilly 8. I've been doing this now for 8. Like I was thinking about this as the episode started. Like I wonder how many times I've talked about this yearly event on this show. So this year we have another really good lineup. We have round 1, which is the Dead Coats versus the Homewreckers. Round 2, which is UK 76 versus our own Danger Cakes, which has Jamie in it. And round 3, which is the Sweethearts versus Rockin' Lloyd Tripp. The show starts at 6 p.m., 18 and up, and there is no cover. So if you are in town for South by Southwest and you weren't looking for something to do next week, and you are willing to brave the horror that is downtown Austin during South by Southwest, come down, say hi. It's going to be a good time. I look forward to doing this every year. I'm excited to be doing this for yet the eighth time in a row. So the last year Rockabilly won. If you want to come out and support the underdog punk rock, come with your hair spiked or something.
Man,
that's what I got this week.
The time Picari Shred got to play that was one of the most fun gigs I've played in the history of playing gigs. Yeah, that was a fun, because we learned a whole punk set mostly for that, which was cool to play Japanese punk music. Not all of it was. Some of it we didn't have enough time to learn on the whole set. But the stuff we played, that was a really good show. I had a blast.
Well,
Tony, I have to tell you, you know how sometimes you'll just remember a dream randomly in the middle of whatever? I just remembered that last night I had a dream that you met a Martian and told him about that your band was called Deserts of Mars.
Well, had you read my Facebook post? Because there was a homeless guy, I don't know if he's homeless, a panhandler, who had a sign that said, collecting money to make it back to Mars, something like that. I'm paraphrasing.
Oh, that's why I had that dream, because of that post.
Yeah, because I gave him. I didn't have a lot of money.
Yeah.
I don't usually carry much cash around in the days of credit, etc. And so I gave him some money and was like, "Hey, I have this band, Deserts of Mars. Like, Good luck on your trip, man.
Yeah, that's why I had that dream. That because you seeded it. That's so funny.
That's hilarious.
That is really cool. It's also cool that you can seed a dream, that you can if you could call up your friends just before they go to sleep and go, Johnny Carson rises from hell, and then they go, okay, good night, and then they come back to you with whatever.
Oh man, too bad there aren't still enough people who listen to this at night. We could start experimenting. Rob Zombie, you never heard this.
All right, fantastic, fantastic. Well, but what was your endorsement?
One of the things that I have been thinking about, and this will kind of hopefully be not too long-winded, but I've been telling people there's a lot of distressing things in the world, and you can only kind of change what's immediately around you, and be mindful of yourself and try to leave as little harm as possible in the world. But part of that to me is music. And so I'm going to say, go to Bandcamp and pick some indie bands and buy their albums, or listen to them on Spotify. At least they get a little bit of cash. Bandcamp's always better because you get more money if you want to help that way. But go listen to some stuff you wouldn't normally, tell some people that you dig what they do and leave that behind. That kind of stuff you can affect, and it leaves a lasting impression. There's not much else you can do other than how you comport yourself, I think, in this world. So go do something positive like that. That's going to be my endorsement, because music's such a big deal in my life. So
that's lovely. That's wonderful. Okay, my endorsements, I have two, and I'll do them fairly quickly. One is Targets, which I had never seen before. Drew recommended it, and the movie Targets stars Boris Karloff, and it was the first it was the directorial debut of Peter Bogdanovich, and it's about two storylines. Boris Karloff is an aging film star who has decided that he wants to retire, but he's going to do one last appearance at a drive-in movie theater. And at the same time, this handsome, normal-seeming, middle-class young man gets up one morning, murders his mom and his wife, and takes a rifle and heads out to start shooting people from a sniper position, and winds up doing a shooting rampage at a drive-in movie theater, the same one that Boris Karloff is headed to. It's a very interesting story. There was very recently an episode of the podcast You Must Remember This, which is all about the movie, which I just listened to today. And she says, if there's been a better film about random gun violence, I haven't seen it. It is very, very good. It was made in 1968 because Roger Corman was perfectly happy to exploit the tragedy at the University of Texas, and it's still a really relevant movie. This is amazing. Just really.
I am really,
amazing.
really glad you watched this. Because I love that movie, and I'm glad that you finally got around to seeing it. That's one I would love to do an episode on, because I think it's not only relevant, but it's fascinating to see the older Karloff basically playing himself.
Yes,
and
it's a very interesting movie from so many angles, both the relevance of it, but also the interesting thing about the two storylines involving one with Karloff. Also the fact that they reuse all of this footage from The Terror, which we had such a great time. That's one of the favorite episodes of this show that we ever recorded, was the one on The Terror. And so all told, it's it is really amazing. I'll tell you, actually, the way that I saw that movie, I had it on DVD. I brought it with me when I went to the farm for a week to do some writing. So I watched it, and I was freezing. I mean, in the house, it was completely free. This was it was comfortable in the house if you wore a coat and boots. But I did have a working DVD player, and I watched Targets while I was there. So it was pretty cool. So you know what? That went long instead of short. So I will save my other endorsement for next week. And that wraps up the Carrie retrospective, which has turned out to be way more thought-provoking. Drew, I think as you said, it's a different conversation than we would have had even if we had done it 2 or 3 years ago. So I'm so thankful that we had this conversation. I have no idea what we're coming back with next, but I'm sure it will be interesting. And maybe if you want to weigh in, people have already been weighing in on the page. If you want to come back and tell us what you think we should do next, we're always taking those ideas, and we will get to it eventually. Thank you very much, everybody, for recording on Oscar night. If you like the show, tell your friends and leave reviews. That's very, very, very helpful. And come to the Facebook page, and we'll argue with you, and you can tell us that we're full of shit for not being nice enough to Rob Zombie. And
some guy with the screen name Zombie just keeps posting. This is the worst. These guys don't know jack about horror. They're terrible. What have they ever done? Zombie. How? Alucard. I don't. What?
That's a wonderful idea that Rob Zombie would. Yeah. Again,
Rob
Lords of
Zombie
Salem
is going to troll
loves
us.
the movie.
Oh.
Oh.
At that point, I guess I couldn't even be mad.
No.
What are you gonna do?
No.
I would truly lose my faith in humanity if Rob Zombie does not have better things to do than troll people on the internet. Like that.
I know we should cut it, but like I just picture that it could in the world we live in, it can happen.
Yeah.
Because you're just like, it's why those guys.
Why those guys? Yes. No. Absolutely.
Well, eventually, what we're going to end up having to do is the Rob Zombie retrospective.
Yes.
But we kind of already have inside, and that's the problem. That's how this all started.
If you went into, if there was some way of searching our entire database, you could probably put together about 45 minutes of discussion just of Rob Zombie, which is hilarious because we've never reviewed a single Rob Zombie movie.
Good night. Just all of this feels, my heart kind of sunk. Because I love, again, it goes back to of all the good things you can say, it's the negative ones that stick out, and that makes me feel crappy.
I know.
Because there's so much that I like about
me too.
what he does.
All right, maybe we'll run into him at a conference and have a fascinating conversation.
No, I think it would end up like my nightmare. I'm convinced.
All right. Thank you, guys. Everybody, have a wonderful evening, and I will probably see you next week. I think that's what's going to happen. So we'll catch up afterwards, figure out what we're going to do. Bye, guys.
Good night.
Night.
Night.